Welcome to this week's video. This week's video I'm going to be talking about the last week's Top Gear episode. Now I don't know if you saw it, but it was about budget electric vehicles and it was filled with some massive inaccuracies and basically dramatised to make used electric vehicles sound like they were scrap, which I'm going to tell you is totally untrue. The reason I feel I'm qualified to talk about this, if you don't know already, I work and sell used cars, petrol, used EVs, and therefore I feel I'm qualified because I work within this industry. I am a used salesperson. I also drive a used Renault Zoe and sold plenty of used Nissan Leafs, Renault Zoes and a whole host of other electric cars. If you are interested in watching videos about electric cars, then click down below, there's a little subscriber button, click that. If you click the bell icon, you'll be notified every time I make a new video, which at the current moment is every single week. Now, they start off straight away by slating the Zoe and Leaf as boring cars. They're not boring. All electric cars are massively torquey off the line. I mean, they will beast anything off a line. Absolutely anything, apart from another EV, but they will beast performance Porsches, supercars off a line. You cannot beat an EV. That to me is not boring. That to me just shows how much fun they can be. Now there is people like Elliot Gold and Chris Ramsey who've modified their EVs to make them even more exciting. So Chris has turned his Leaf into a rally Leaf. It's mainly just a few stickers and roof rack and stuff like that, but Chris did the Mongolian rally in that Leaf. So you can't say it's boring. And then you've got people like Elliot Gold that have completely stripped out the interior of the Zoe and turned it into a proper rally car. Now, there is a video top right of when I went in that rally car. It's not a great video. It was live. I filmed it live and you can hear me scream like a little girl. And that is because that car is so much fun when it's been got proper track tyres on, proper track suspension on, and you've got someone like Elliot Gold, who's a professional rally driver, screaming it around the corners. Let's touch on some of the other things that they said. They also went into how they have no sound and how that's boring. Well, yes, if you are one of these people that finds a combustion noise that is damaging the environment absolutely exciting, then you might consider that some EVs have a boring sound. However, if you've driven the BMW i3 or the Jaguar I-Pace that make a squealing scale-electric sound when you're absolutely beasting it, then you get the same feedback. And if you've got something like the BMW i8, which has a fake projected noise down the speaker, you could also argue there is absolutely zero difference. Personally, I prefer the scale-electric whirring noise that you get from the i3. Now here's the biggie for me. He tars all electric second-hand cars that are rubbish and they have only 50-mile ranges when they hit 80,000 miles. What he doesn't explain is that the Nissan Leaf he picked was the very, very first Japanese Nissan built Leafs, which had terrible battery chemistry, terrible anything that looked after the battery, terrible BMS system, terrible battery chemistry, and there is less than 2,000 of these Leafs. He said the average second-hand electric car has a range of only 50 miles. The average, no, not the average, just what the small segment of car that you picked with a, terrible batteries, terrible battery performance when they're old. Now, if you look at someone like, there's a taxi company up in Dundee that have a fleet of Nissan Leafs with hundreds of thousands of miles on and very, 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 very minimal battery degradation. Most second-hand EV 22 kilowatt batteries in the winter with the heater on full will easily do 65, 70 miles plus. Now, that might not sound a lot to someone who doesn't own an EV, but when you consider the average person in this country only commutes 10 miles a day, that's work, back, work, back, work. It's several days of your journey to work and back. And considering that you can plug an EV in every single night and charge it, then there's no real massive issue. Unless you are doing a long distance, in which case you've got rapid chargers on the motorway service stations, which now brings me into the next annoying little point that Top Gear purposely dramatised and made worse. And that's the fact that they Paddy turned up at this lady's house with a caravan and started to try and plug into a 3-point plug and took the minute that they sat around drinking cups of tea while they waited for the car to charge. No, that's not the reality of an EV charging. The reality of EV charging is that you charge at night when you go to bed and wake up in the morning with a full tank. Now let's really take into consideration how long it takes me to fill up a petrol car. Where I live, the nearest petrol station is 10 minutes away. So I have to drive 10 minutes to a petrol station and then 10 minutes back to where I was going. That's 20 minutes to charge a petrol car for me. Plus the filling up time, call it 5 minutes to put the fuel in. That's 25 minutes out of my day to put petrol in a car. It takes me 30 seconds to plug my EV in at home and I wake up with it full. Now, if I went to a motorway service station on a long journey, yes, the petrol car would take 5 minutes to fill up at the petrol station, where the EV would take half an hour. But half an hour at a motorway service station, is that long? Well, let's put it in perspective. If you stop at a motorway service station, you're going to go for a wee, 5 minutes. You might get a coffee, 5 minutes, okay? You've got to walk from the building to from the car park, 5 minutes. So we're already there 15 minutes. Now, if you actually time yourself, most people at a motorway service station, the dwell time for a motorway service station is about 25 to 30 minutes, which is exactly how long an EV takes to charge. So no issues there. It's not really any quicker driving a petrol car, is it? Really? And how often do you do those massive journeys that you know, 80, 90, 100 plus journeys that you're going to have to keep stopping at motorway service stations? Very, very little times in your life. And if you're going to do it that regular, then just buy an EV with a bigger battery like the BMW i3 that I have outside that does over 150 miles on one charge. Now let's move on to the last couple of points they made. They said there's not enough charge points because we're going to have so many electric cars in a couple of years. Yes, they actually made a valid point. There is not enough electric car infrastructure, but they made the comment, who's going to pay for it? Well, I'll tell you who's going to pay for it. Commercial companies like BP Polar are going to install chargers to all their petrol service stations throughout the entire country because there is a business model for EV charge points. If you stop for a charge, you're going to go in a shop. That is where petrol stations make the real money from, is the dwell time. So an EV fits in perfectly to a petrol station's, you know, a forecourts plans pricing point. They can make money from selling you coffee, sweets, etc. And that is what's going to happen. We're going to see a change of petrol service stations turning into a more cafe-based sort of system. Now, the new BP Polar chargers are very, very, very fast. I think, I have to double check, I'll display it if I'm wrong, but I think they're 150 kilowatt chargers, which is an immense speed of charging. Now, yes, these used EVs at the moment on the market can't handle it, but cars are coming that can handle it, and for the majority of people today, used EVs meets that price point. Now, this draws me on to the last lie they made at the end of the program, which was an 80,000 mile Leaf can only do 30 miles. Yes, if you bought a Japan-built Leaf with the terrible battery chemistry and it had terrible battery cell degradation, then yes, there is a small chance that you might buy one of those old Japan Nissan Leafs that only does 30 miles to a charge. But what he didn't say is that you could buy a 7-year-old UK-built Nissan Leaf that does pretty much exactly the same mileage it did when it was sold new, or you can buy a Renault Zoe that is on battery lease and the battery will be covered up to its 75% degraded and you'll get a new battery pack. Now, the reality is most, apart from the old Nissan Japan-built Leafs, most used second-hand Leafs, Zoes, i3s have newer battery chemistry that would not degrade to this level, and the degradation on most EVs is minimal, and I mean tiny. So thank you very much for watching this week's video. Please click subscribe, consider becoming a patron. Patron support has helped me buy new equipment, microphones, and also fund the ongoing costs of running the channel, like my video editing software that costs me over £30 a month. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next week. Goodbye.